Hey there, buddy, Dan. Maybe a little too much sugar, you think?
What could go wrong?
So before we review this article here, Hyperglycemic Crisis, I want to tell everybody that you have a secret, which is you're addicted. Addicted like a heroin addict, like a crack.
I love dessert. I
You
love good dessert.
Yeah, you show up at the office all the time with these kinds of things. This is you. This is him. This is what he does. So, but for now, we're going to review this article: Hyperglycemic Crisis, HHS, and DKA. It was in the Journal of Emergency Medicine. Let's get into it.
It's a nice review. All right, so they start off with just basic definitions. This is bread and butter. We all know this.
Yeah.
With DKA and HHS, hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state, that's what it's called now, not honk anymore.
I like honk better.
Honk is nice. But these are the main criteria for DKA: glucose greater than 250, that's mg per deciliter, pH less than 7.3, presence of ketones, bicarb less than 15 milliequivalents per liter. That's DKA. HHS, you have glucose typically greater than 300.
Higher.
Yeah, really high. Typically greater than 600 oftentimes. And then pH, it's usually normal, so it's greater than 7.3, minimal to absent ketones in the urine or the serum. Bicarb generally tends to be greater than 15 milliequivalents per liter.
Kind of the
but really,
part.
the defining feature is the serum osmolality, which tends to be greater than 320.
Okay.
So that's the HHS. There's a litany of precipitant causes that trigger hyperglycemic crises. The take-home point is the most common cause is infection.
Green monster. Oh,
infection. Who's holding a syringe because they're insulin non-compliant?
Oh, very nice. Nice. They just
Second most common
that
cause.
syringe
That's
out.
right.
Forget
Yeah.
it.
So sepsis
Well
or
done.
infection is going to be the most common cause, the precipitant cause. But don't ever forget the screening EKG. You might think like, what's the point? I mean, that's probably vomiting their brains out. But you cannot miss the STEMI that caused them to go into hyperglycemic crisis,
So
because
strange, but true.
there is something you can do in the immediate interim, as opposed to, oh man, if you 2 hours later you did the insulin drip and then someone got an EKG just for the heck of it, STEMI's there, it's like,
not good, not good. You're not going to make your window. They got like 2-3 ADF right there. All right, bring it.
And they go through several critical management pearls and pitfalls that are very important that a lot of providers have tripped up over. So make sure you identify that cause. Don't miss the STEMI. Look for the reason why they went into hyperglycemic crisis. Avoid hypokalemia, hypoglycemia, especially as you're going and giving the insulin. You got to monitor that very carefully. Don't overcorrect and rapidly overcorrect them. The concern, especially in children, is the cerebral edema issue, especially with kids. And make sure when you resolve the DKA or the HHS that you overlap the IV and sub-Q insulin by an hour or two at least. So you resolved it, you're still on the insulin drip, start the sub-Q, wait an hour or two before you taper off or titrate off the IV drip.
I feel like we've done one of these in a recent LLSA here, right?
A couple of years ago.
But this is all stuff we do all the time.
And
Obviously,
then,
very labor intensive. This stuff.
Recheck, monitor the labs every 1 to 2 hours so you don't get screwed up somewhere. With regard to management, there's a very important point. Give the insulin drip at 0.14 units per kilogram per hour. No need for a bolus, just start the drip. You should expect a decrement of about 50 to 75 mg per deciliter per hour in your glucose.
50 to 75 per hour and 0.14. And if I were to make a really lazy question, this might be one of them.
That's right. There you go. And if you don't get that 10% decrease within the first hour of starting the insulin drip, that's when you can consider adding a bolus.
A little bit.
0.14 units per kilogram bolus of regular insulin at that time IV, and then continue.
If you've got the time to manage it that closely, good luck to you. I'm so glad. I'm working at your shop.
There's always a question and controversy that comes up with regard to the delusional hyponatremia that happens in really, really high glucose states. And the guidelines always say 1.6. That's the correction factor for every 100 above 100 for mg per deciliter of serum glucose. That's how you correct and adjust the serum sodium.
So every 100 above 100, you bring the serum sodium
up by
1.6.
So if you have 200, if your serum glucose is 300, so that's 200 times 2 times 1.6 is you add 3.2 to that serum.
You can stop the panic if you have something that looks.
The article goes into the deeper level evidence. It's like, well, 2.4 might be more accurate. Above 400, then you should elevate. 1.6 is what the guidelines say.
Very good.
This is a very, very important point, not just for the article, but for real life as well. If your serum potassium is low, less than 3.3, don't start the insulin. You hold the insulin.
Suck that potassium right out.
Replete that potassium. 20 to 30 milliequivalents per hour or per liter.
So if your left hand is pointing with a plus minus blood dripping, give me that one. Why is that there? Tell me.
That's just check the potassium before you start the insulin.
Potassium before you start the insulin.
Yeah, because if your potassium is low, you need to replete it before you give the insulin.
All right, very good.
That's very important. The bicarb always comes up with regard to hyperglycemic crisis, especially DKA.
Yeah.
There is a guideline that says you can consider giving it if your pH is less than 6.9.
That's like one of the Diabetes Association says it.
ADA,
But
the criteria for resolution, these are all things we also remember and understand. Glucose less than 200, pH is resolved, bicarb resolved, anion gap is closed for DKA. For HHS, really it's actually based off of clinical pictures. So you have, in addition to normal serum osmolarity, you have normalized vital signs, normal mentation. Typically your glucose should be less than 300.
So go through that again because I was fast. So that's the resolution of DKA. You're trying to get them below 200, pH greater than 7.3.
There's objective criteria you can actually adjust.
Your gap is closing to normal.
HHS is a little bit more difficult.
HHS is a little fuzzier.
Yeah, it's normal mentation, normal vitals, normal serum osmolarity is probably the key lab factor.
Yeah.
So the take-home points is the most common cause of precipitant causes for DKHHS is infection and insulin non-compliance. If your potassium is low, hold the insulin, replete the potassium first if it's less than 3.3 milligrams per liter. Start your drip at 0.14 units per kilogram per hour, no need for a bolus.
All right, Paul, that was the Journal of Emergency Medicine's Hyperglycemic Crisis. You are currently eating glycemia. I'm about to test your sugar because I think there's probably going to be a problem here.